about, playing the game and obeying the rules, Ken's got all the rules for the pickleball memorized. So if you guys are ready to play pickleball afterwards, we set it up yesterday. Thanks to everybody who came and helped out. So we'll play pickleball after. All right, so we're jumping back into Song of Solomon. Who's got their Bible with them? All right, perfect. So open up to Song of Solomon. There we go. All right. And so last week, my sister talked about Song of Solomon chapter 4, that the Lord delights in his people, right? Like that we often think about our love for the Lord, expressing like, oh God, like we love you. We're in love with you. The deep words and affections of our heart for the Lord. And yet the shocking answer from him is that he loves us with even deeper passion. Reading Song of Solomon is almost like being in the room with like two people that really love each other. Sometimes I have to, like me and Beck have to apologize to Cindy. Oh, she already went to the back. But sometimes Cindy will like walk up and I'm like giving like Becca an embrace and Cindy will be like, oh, sorry. Like, a Song of Solomon's like that. And actually these chapters that we're in, it's like this back and forth antiphonal, this back and forth dialogue between the beloved and the bride, right? And they're just going back and forth. They're like, I love you, you're beautiful. And it's like, no, you're beautiful. It's like, no, you're beautiful. And then back and forth, and you're kind of in the room with them. You're like, all right, I'll let you, you're with somebody like two, I used to take care of youth kids when I was in college, and it's like the youth kids, you just got to get out of the way. You're like, oh my gosh, you guys just, no purple. You guys got it. But that's how the Lord feels and the affections of actually the pure marriage love that the bridegroom has for the bride. And that Jesus is captivated by our beauty. Not only are we captivated when we see Jesus, we're like, Jesus, you're beautiful. You have eyes of fire, hair like wool. Like we're in love with you. He also echoes that back to us as the bridegroom. He echoes that back to the bride and says, I love you. You're beautiful. Even when, obviously, as we look around ourselves, sometimes we're not, right? And yet he sees the good in us and he speaks that beauty into us. All right. And a lot of the analogy in Song of Solomon, we've talked about Song of Solomon being like a poem, is this analogy of a garden. All right, so today I want to talk about the garden, a garden closed. All right, so Song of Solomon, chapter 5. Let's flip to chapter 5 together, and we'll read. I'll read the passage. All right, Song of Solomon, chapter 5, starting in verse 1. I have come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends, drink, yes, drink deeply, O beloved ones. I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. I have taken off my robe, how can I put it on again? I have washed my feet, how can I defile them? My beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the locks. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. My heart leaped up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. The watchmen who went around the city found me. They struck me. They wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, tell him that I am lovesick. What is your beloved more than another beloved, O fairest among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved, that you so charge us? My beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000. His head is like the finest gold. His locks are wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like a bed of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies, dripping liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is carved ivory and laid with sapphires. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Amen. Word of the Lord for us today. All right, so talking about gardening. So in this chapter, we've got this beautiful picture, and again, back to that dialogue of the bridegroom and the bride. They're just telling each other how beautiful they are, right? And it starts with the bridegroom coming into the garden. It starts with him saying that I've come into the garden and enjoyed it, right? And then in the middle, we have this little story of the door being locked and the bride hearing the voice of the beloved, and kind of this conflict of like, well, I'm already ready for bed. I'm already in my bed. I can't put on my robe again. I have get my feet dirty. And she kind of delays in opening the door. And when she opens the door, she's already delayed and he's gone. All right. But then it goes back to that dialogue of love. So it's a very interesting chapter. But I want to start with that garden analogy. I included a funny little meme that I found. I was talking with Becca last night about this garden analogy, and actually we were like, it's kind of funny that I'm the one talking about it, because if you know me, I don't know anything about gardening. I know very, very little about gardening, and Becca is the gardener, all right? So it's kind of funny, but it was beautiful for me to just chat with her and be like, what is gardening about? Like, what do you know about gardening? But the little bit I do know, is important because God is a gardener, right? He describes himself as a gardener. And in fact, we talk a lot about the whole overarching story of the Bible, right? Genesis to Revelation. That story is a garden story, right? It starts in the garden, and in the middle there's a garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, and the end there's a garden as well, right? It's about a garden. God describes himself as the gardener. In Genesis chapter 2, the Garden of Eden, that was the original design, right? The Lord planted a garden in the east, and Eden, there he put the man that he formed. The garden, God as the gardener, wanting to walk and dwell and enjoy his people in the midst of the garden. And at the end, the last chapter of the Bible, the very last chapter, the promise that we hold to at the end of the story is that there is also a garden, right? That same garden. It's always been the desire of his heart. God is a gardener, all right? So I, as somebody who doesn't know very much about gardening, am inspired to learn more about gardening. I'm sure Becca will hold me to that at some point. Right? I know how to mulch a little bit, but I don't know how to grow anything. The only things that I've ever had plant-wise have been given to me, and I've never grown anything from a seed, and pretty promptly those things die, afterwards. And in fact, I can't really tell like what's a weed and what's a flower. So when I first moved into the house over here, we bought the house. We call it the Hope House. It's the one over at the corner across the parking lot. But the first summer after I moved in, I noticed there was this plant right outside the door at the back, and it was about yay tall, and there was this little purple flower on it. Okay. And I just thought it was a flower that the previous owner had planted. So whenever I would mow the lawn and stuff or do trimming around the edge, I would carefully like avoid cutting that thing because I thought, oh, it's a flower. It's like a nice flower. Now for the guys in the room, you look at this picture, I mean, it's hard to tell, right? I don't want the girls to answer because the girls are probably like, what are you talking about? That to me looks like it was a flower. I thought it was like a nice little plant, and it grew up to like this tall. But then I started to notice that like it's kind of prickly, and like it's got a really thick stem, and it only occasionally has the purple flower on it. Becca was like, "That's a weed," and she cut it down. All right. But as a gardener can look at that and be like, "Oh, that's a weed." For me, I'm like, I'm not a gardener. I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like maybe it is a flower. Maybe it's good. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what I'm growing. I don't know what I'm growing. And how much worse, so spiritually, that's us as well. If we're not in tune with what the Lord desires and what he enjoys, as a guy, I could be like, oh, there's a flower there. Hey, maybe Becca will enjoy that. And she would look at it and be like, no, that's a weed. I'm not going to enjoy that. Right? And so we have to know what is on the heart of the one that we love. What are we preparing in our garden, and for whom are we preparing it? Right? And the Song of Solomon teaches us that the garden enclosed is for the Lord. Right? And what are we cultivating in our garden? We could be cultivating very nice flowers, or we could be like me, cultivating a weed. I think I watered it at points. All right. So again, it is odd that I'm talking about gardens as somebody who is basically flower blind. Like I can't look at that and be like, that's a flower or not. All right. But I think that that's the spiritual principle we all run into in our own gardens, is to identify the weeds and cultivate the flowers, right? What are we producing? Are we producing good fruit? Are we nurturing something that is good? Are we nurturing something that's bad? All right. Mary has talked before on our Friday nights about like all of us are discipled by something. All of us, right, are filling our minds with something, whether it's the social media of the world or whatever it might be. All of us are doing something in the same sort of way, the garden analogy, all of us are growing something, What are we growing? And is it pleasant and pleasing to the Lord? All right. Song of Solomon, chapter 5, it starts off, and the Lord says to the bridegroom, the bridegroom says to the bride, I have come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I've gathered my myrrh with my spice. I've eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I've drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends, drink, yes, drink deeply, O beloved ones. All right, the last part there is the companion speaking, and they see that the bridegroom is enjoying the fruits of the garden, right? He's enjoying the spices. He's enjoying the honey that's grown there. He's enjoying the milk. He's enjoying everything that has come out of this garden of the bride. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. That's what he's speaking over you and I, that we're a garden. And he wants to enjoy the spice. He wants to enjoy the honey. He wants to enjoy the milk that we produce. And it's a garden enclosed. Right. Beck and I were talking about this yesterday. And again, as somebody who's not a gardener, my only experience of gardens is I go enjoy what somebody else has gardened, right? I go and enjoy, oh, there's a public garden. And, and Beck has planted some nice flowers in the back. I'll just go and enjoy that. But I didn't put any work into it, But that wasn't typically the type of garden that would have existed in the biblical times. And in fact, throughout most of history, that's not really the type of garden that would have existed, right? So we've had the chance to, if you've ever been to Tokyo, the most popular thing to do in Tokyo is to go visit the Imperial Gardens. And the Imperial Gardens is this moat-surrounded city that was basically just private gardens for the emperor. And that was standard. That's an imperial garden. That's a garden for the king. And that's typically what we should think of when we think about a garden. That's what Jesus and the disciples and everybody in the Old Testament would have thought of a garden. All right, that it was cultivated specifically for a person, not a public garden, but like the Song of Solomon says, a garden enclosed, right? A garden for the king. In fact, if you entered into the imperial gardens, you would have been killed, right? You couldn't just go in, right? It was only for the emperor and his family. All right, so exclusivity was typical. Even like one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, was made for what? It was made for the king, for King Nebuchadnezzar. All right. And so the fruits of that are not just for public consumption. The fruits of it, the flowers, the fruit, all the smells and spices was for the king. Right? It's exclusive. And so I think the question in Song of Solomon of this chapter today is, again, what are we cultivating in our garden? And are we being intentional about cultivating those things for the king? It's like a marriage. Beck and I are getting ready. Our wedding is in 3 weeks. Yeah, 2.5, 3 weeks. We're getting ready. Yeah. And so even just thinking about afterwards, getting ready, closets and stuff like that. And Beck is getting ready for all this stuff. She's like, how much clothes do you have? And I'm like, all right. How many shoes do you have? All right, too many. Preparing, right? That process of actually living together, right? Living together and being together. But imagine if we decide, okay, we're getting married in 3 weeks, and after a honeymoon, we're coming together, we're gonna live together. But imagine if there was locked rooms in your house, right? It's okay, we're living together. You can be in the kitchen, but this room's not for you, right? How many people would have that in their marriage? What kind of marriage would that be, right? For the married folks in this room, it's do you have a private room that only you have the key for in your house? Probably not, right? We were nodding. That's where the raccoon skins are. Weaver's got a locked room with the raccoon skins, right? But Brittany has access to all the rooms in that house. We've been at Weaver's house. If you've been there, is a huge cabin, has many, many different rooms. But as his bride, Brittany does have the key to all those places. She can go and look at the raccoon skins in that private room. All of you guys who are married, there's no locked doors, right? There's no locked closets. That entirety of that home that you share together is for each other to share together, right? And so that garden enclosed that we've cultivated in our hearts for the Lord, oftentimes that we do have locked rooms in our hearts, right? We have these locked rooms that the Lord doesn't, and we say, this far and no more, Lord. You can have my kitchen, you can be in here, but maybe my workplace is my separate thing. You're not allowed into there, right? Or these parts of my emotions and my feelings and my identity, this part is locked, right? You don't have the key to there. And what the Lord wants is that entire garden to be for him. He wants the key to everything, right? A garden closed, not for everybody else to have and to share, but actually for him. So it's almost like there's 2 ends of that spectrum, that we have a locked door to some places, or that place that we have is actually for everybody and not exclusively for him. Does that make sense? So we sometimes fall into both we sometimes fall off the chasm on both ends. You know, Becca and I, we have our date nights on Thursday nights, and something we've talked about is sometimes I'll be like, I'm so busy with, like, I've got this thing for work, or I've got this thing, like, even for ministry, good things, right? Good things that are necessary. And yet sometimes I fail to protect that time because I'm like, oh, I got to work on this. We were listening to this message by Michael Miller. I think actually Cindy Cowd recommended it to us. But he was talking about how he and his wife, when they obviously there's things that they have to talk about from a like logistical standpoint. And he says, we set a little timer. I pushed the timer. I said, we're going to talk about this for 5 minutes. And when that timer is up, boom, we're done talking about it. And then now we talk about each other, and that protecting that time about this is about you and me. I want to know what's on your heart, right? So that logistical portion, important. He had to do it, but he wants to protect that time, right? To be exclusively for his bride, right? In the same way, our relationships as the bride of Christ, are we exclusively committing our hearts, those areas in our garden to him, and are we allowing him to have full access? In this chapter here is the section that actually the bride fails to do that. And again, we fail to do that. So I sleep, but my heart is awake. It's the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, and my locks with the drops of night. And she responds by saying, well, you know, I'm already in rest. I'm already in bed. How can I take off my robe? How can I put it on again? I've washed my feet. How can I defile them? The beloved has his hand on the latch of the door. My heart yearned for him. I rose to open for my beloved. My hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the lock. The door is locked, though, right? That door is locked. She didn't have it open for him. My sister, I wish she was here, but my sister hates closed doors. All right, she has this thing where she's like very much against closed doors, to the point that one time we were on vacation together with a bunch of people, in the master bathroom. I was in the master bedroom with a bathroom attached, and there wasn't enough bathrooms for everybody. So in the morning, she came to use my bathroom, and she's like, you know what? We don't need doors. So she just like flings my door open. I'm still asleep, goes use the bathroom, and just leaves the door open. I wake up maybe like half an hour later. I'm in my underwear, just like lounging on the bed. And then I hear noises, and I'm like, man, I can really hear the noises outside pretty clearly, like in the kitchen, people walking around. I look over, doors wide open, people are just walking around, and I'm just there like my underwear, like sleeping, right? There was no lock on the door, and the door was open, right? So like exposed, you know, basically. You know. Now that obviously is uncomfortable for me in that moment, but in a marriage situation, right, there is not, you're exposed to each other and you're not hidden, right? There's no locked door in a marriage. And so for in this situation, in the Song of Solomon, she's got that door locked and he's knocking, right? He stands at the door and knocks, but that door was locked. I think oftentimes, again, that's how we keep parts of our heart that we're not comfortable with giving to the Lord. We keep it locked, right? We keep it locked. He has to knock. When really, as the bridegroom, he should have free access. You know, the garden is a place of rest, right? The Lord wants to come in and enjoy that garden, to have free access. He even says, Matthew 8:20, foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head, right? Your heart, my heart, our lives are a resting place for the Lord, right? Does he find rest in you? Is what we're cultivating in our hearts, in our gardens, a restful place for the Lord? Or are we cultivating things that are not going to be restful for him? You know, it's like if I went to Becca's garden in the back here and just started, you know, cultivating those weeds that I don't know the difference of, right? Well, that's not going to be restful for her. John 14:23, Jesus promises that if we make our hearts a place of rest for him, if we obey his word, if we till the soil, if we prepare rightly, he's going to come and make his home with us, right? John 14:23, Jesus answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. Are we preparing our hearts, our homes, our garden as a place for the Lord to find rest? Right? The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Are we a resting place for him? Are we doing that work to prepare and till the soil? Are we unlocking the doors? Are we flinging wide the gates to make a place that he can come and rest? Not stand at the door and knock, not like, you know, those of you who've been over to the Ark House here, you know, it's like back at one time, it's like, I don't know why we have a code. Everybody knows a code. Everybody can come in because it's like family, right? If you're a family, you walk in the door, right? You know, the same way that, you know, if I go over to my sister's house, I just walk in the door, right? The same way that you have kids, they come in, they walk in the door, right? Aislinn doesn't stand at the door and ring the doorbell to get into her house, right? She comes right in. Lance comes home from work. He doesn't have to knock on the door. He comes right in, right? Making that door open and unlocked for the Lord, making every room open to him, cultivating a garden, a place of rest for him. Does he find a home in you? You know, again, Revelation 3:20, behold, I stand at the gate and knock. Let's open the door. Open the door for him. Now, sometimes it's hard to do that, right? Sometimes it's hard to identify those areas in our hearts where we haven't unlocked and opened the door. We close off those areas a lot of time because of what? Fear and because of previous hurts. There's a lot of areas where we're not willing to let the Lord have, that we hold on to as almost a defense mechanism from times that we've been hurt. You know, who's been hurt in the church before? I feel like everybody probably would raise their hand, right? I know Frank was a pastor, Sue was a pastor, they were in the pastorate. Can you be in the pastorate and not get hurt by the sheep? Frank is shaking his head, right? We're going to be hurt, you know. In fact, even in marriages, if you asked any married couple, have you hurt each other? Yeah, they're going to say, of course, we've hurt each other at points, right? And even in the Song of Solomon here, the watchman, when the bride goes out, she says, the watchman actually struck me. She's hurt by the very people that were supposed to watch over her, right? They struck me. They wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away. And yet still she says to the companions, to the daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my beloved, tell him, I am lovesick. Right? Sometimes it's easy to hold on to those areas in our hearts when we've been hurt before. But that hinders our ability to meet the Lord in how he is. You know, I was talking with somebody, and he said, I have a hard time relating to God as a good father. It was because he didn't have a father, right? He didn't have a father. And so if those absences cause us sometimes to withhold portions of our heart. And I think one of the areas that exhibits itself is that then in our closed garden, that instead of growing pleasant flowers and spices for the Lord, we start to grow those weeds. We start to grow that bitterness when it's not open to the Lord. And we withhold parts of our heart. This isn't in the chapter that we read, but there's a part of Song of Solomon that says in chapter 6:13, this is the companion speaking to the bride, and they say, return, return, O Shulamite. Return that we may look upon you. What would you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the dance of the two camps. All right. And the dance of the two camps, I always wondered what that phrase meant. And that phrase, and Benny can correct me if I'm butchering the Hebrew as always, but it's the Mahanaim. Mahanaim? Oh, Benny said I did it right. Okay, the Hebrew. The dance of the two camps, that Mahanaim, all right, you'll see it in your Bible. That was where Jacob wrestled with God. Mahanaim, that's one of the few instances of it, and it's echoed here in Song of Solomon. But it's the dance of two camps. Not only did Jacob wrestle with God there, but Jacob also, when he didn't know if Esau was going to be good towards him, he split his group into half, right? He said, I'm not sure if when I go to meet my brother, if he's going to be good to me or if he's going to hate me. I'm going to divide my camp, my group into two parts. I'm going to, almost like if we divide our hearts into two parts. Genesis 32, 1-3. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, two camps. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. All right. And so Jacob, when he was going to meet Esau, and he heard that Esau had this giant army with him, he was worried. He's like, I think Esau's going to attack me. But really, the truth was, Esau was so excited to see his brother that he wept, and they embraced. All right. But Jacob, in that uncertainty, right, that past trauma, he's like, I don't know if I can trust my brother. I'm going to divide my heart. I'm going to divide my camp. He put one part of his camp back in the back, and then he put the other part in the front. He put his closest people in the back, his kids and stuff, and then he actually ordered his kids and the ones that he liked the best, and then put the ones he liked the best in the back, and his favorite wife in the back, and then he put everybody else in the front. Imagine being the ones that were like, he was like, yeah, you guys are in group one, and you're like, it's like count off by ones and twos, except you guys are ones because I like you and you guys are two. Like, he divided his heart. He divided his group because he wasn't sure. He didn't trust what was going to happen with Esau. That's that dance of the two camps that we ourselves do with our hearts as well. We say, God, I don't know if I can trust you because I don't know that you're a good father because I didn't have a good father, right? And so we don't trust, and we withhold those dearest and maybe closest parts of our heart. And we say we want to protect it, right? We lock that door and close it off, right? That dance of two camps. In the middle of this Song of Solomon, where the bride is professing her love, there's still that dance of two camps. Even in the process, we talked a few weeks ago about being called away to the mountains, and the bride says, actually, no, I'm comfortable where I'm at. Even after learning that, she still has the door locked in this chapter, right? She still has the door locked and is not sure if she's going to answer it right away, answer that knock on the door. That's that dance of the two camps, the dance of the Mahanaim, that we do in ourselves when we lock our doors, when we partition our hearts. And again, it's part of that safety, right? It's part of that safety. If we've experienced hurts, experienced traumas, we lock those parts of our heart. We lock those gates, and we don't know if he's safe. I always think of this passage from C.S. Lewis, those of you who have read it, but this famous passage about Aslan the lion. Aslan is a lion, the great lion. Oh, said Susan, I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you, right? The king. Again, the imperial garden that we've made in our hearts, it's for the king. And is he safe? No. Of course he isn't safe, but we know he's good, right? He's all powerful. And so we don't have to have the locks on our doors, and we don't have to have the partition and closed doors of our room. We have to open everything for him because, again, he wants that exclusive garden, a garden enclosed for him. So let us give him the keys to our garden. Because otherwise, our garden, again, produces not fruit, it produces weeds. Isaiah chapter 5, if you have that, you can turn to it. But Isaiah chapter 5 shows it's like a mini Song of Solomon, right? And it's God talking about actually his garden in Israel. Isaiah chapter 5, verses 1 to 4. Now let me sing to my well-beloved, again, the same language as the Song of Solomon, a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. My well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. He dug it up and cleared out its stones. He planted it with the choicest of vines. He built a tower in its midst and also made a winepress in it. So he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of, so he expected to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, please, between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done into my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why then, when I was expecting it to bring forth good grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes? All right. So again, the Lord, looking at his vineyard, is it going to be a place of rest for him? Or is it going to be a place actually that produces bad fruit? My sister hit on this a little bit last week, but again, God is the gardener. He talks about himself as the gardener in that last chapter. The gardener sows the seeds. He prepared everything, and yet there's also an obligation on our part to have good soil for that seed to plant in, right? There's in Matthew 13:18, many of you are familiar with the parable of the good sower. There's 4 types of soil, and only one of them bears fruit. Right? Only one of them bears fruit that is lasting. A lot of that might sound like, okay, well, we have to prepare our hearts and till our soil. Doesn't that sound a little bit like works? Well, we do have to have effort. It does require. Like the Lord grows the seed, he sows it, but there's also responsibility on our parts to have hearts that are good soil to receive it. My sister talked about last week about actually enjoying his presence, tilling the soil. It's not just enough to just show up, right? Not just enough to even just have the word read to us. We actually have to meet the person behind the words to till the soil. I love this quote from Dallas Willard, and again, as somebody who doesn't garden very much, I know that there's a lot of work, though, that goes into it. I see Becca out there gardening all the time. I see Christy out there, like, putting hours into her garden, and if you get the chance to go to their house, it's a beautiful garden. It takes a lot of time, right? It takes a lot of time. But the seed itself doesn't grow by our efforts, but the preparation of the soil does. And Dallas Willard says this: the path of spiritual growth and the riches of Christ is not a passive one. Grace is not opposed to effort. It is opposed to earning. Effort is action. Earning is attitude. You have never seen people more active than those who have been set on fire by the grace of God. All right. It's not that we're earning, right? We're not earning anything, but it's actually our attitude because we love him, right? We love him. We want to prepare our soil and till it so that we can grow good fruits for him to enjoy. All right. So there is an effort involved in it. We've talked a lot about the efforts of prayer, even coming during the week. I know a lot of you that were here on the past weekend to learn about tools for the prayer room. That prayer room meeting is a place of tilling that soil to prepare. We don't come here and spend 2 hours and then we decide that we've earned something from it. No, it's actually encountering the one, enjoying him in his garden, and letting him enjoy us in his garden as well. I want to talk also about the companions, all right? Again, it's not just us one-on-one, but actually we get to do it together. We get to do it together, all right? When we come together in a corporate prayer room, a corporate prayer meeting, we get to encourage each other in the growing and cultivating of our garden. The companions are the daughters of Jerusalem that sing songs alongside the beloved and the bride in Song of Solomon. Chapter 5, verse 9, we read this. What is your beloved more than another beloved, O fairest among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved that you so charge us? Throughout the whole book of Song of Solomon, these companions are asking questions, they're encouraging, and they're exhorting the bride, even when she has moments of failure. And so how important it is for us to be good companions to each other as well, companions to help each other grow in cultivating that soil. Oftentimes in ministry, or if you're helping out serving a church, it's easy to even look at other people's soil, but not take care of your own. In fact, the Shulamite says this in the first chapter. She says, "Don't look at me. I'm dark but lovely. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept." We have to keep our own vineyards, but also have an obligation to help each other keep the vineyard as well, each person's vineyard, because that vineyard, my vineyard, your garden, my garden, is unto that same person, that same bridegroom, the Lord. All right? Let's help each other as companions. Let's partner together and encouraging each other not to cease doing good, but to pursue deeply cultivating our soil for the Lord. Right? Just like the companions do in Song of Solomon, asking questions, exhorting, encouraging even, asking questions. What are you seeing in the Lord today? What do you see in the beloved that's beautiful? What are you praying about? What have you encountered in that place of prayer? Tell me about your beloved. Tell me about the Lord, the beautiful things that you've seen. Right? I love talking with people after prayer and say, what are you praying about? What has the Lord answered for you? What have you seen in Him that's beautiful and good that encourages you to continue pursuing Him in the Word, in the place of prayer? Song of Solomon at the end of the book, the companions actually say, "We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister in the day she's spoken for?" This is chapter 8, verse 8. And it's after this whole section about the bride being, beautiful with dove's eyes, fully formed, belly like a heap of wheat, all these beautiful things. But then they also say, actually, we have another little sister, and she's not yet formed, right? She hasn't yet grown in the Lord. What shall we do? And their answer is that they commit, in verse 9, I don't have it up there, but they make a commitment to build her up, and they make a commitment to protect her, all right? And so the same sort of thing for us in our garden. Maybe our garden, you've tended your own vineyard, you're looking to help somebody else's vineyard, and maybe their vineyard is growing. Commit to building them up, commit to protecting them as well, commit to helping each other grow our vineyards for the Lord, all right? It's a stewardship. Beck and I have been reading this book by Tim Keller about marriage. And in it, one of my favorite chapters that brought tears to my eyes was he was talking about the beauty of the vision of marriage being a calling forth the good things that the Lord has put in that other person unto one day presenting them pure and spotless before the Lord on the wedding day, right? When we stand on that wedding day before the altar, it's almost a foreshadowing of the day when we'll stand before the Lord and present that other person in all the fullness of what the Lord has called them for. I think that's a beautiful picture. I think that's a beautiful thing that we're also called to each other as a spiritual family, to present each other pure and spotless one day before the Lord. To be like, I walked with Greg, and Greg walked with me, and we helped each other grow in our garden, and now it's a pleasant thing for the Lord, and God, I give that and present that to you, right? How beautiful that is. One of my mentors once told me, and I've shared this quote before, but basically discernment, the better part of discernment is not identifying bad things, right? Everybody usually thinks, discernment is identifying bad things, being able to see bad things and avoid them. But actually the harder part of discernment, he said, is actually seeing the good things in people, right? Seeing what God sees in them, even when we don't see it or they don't see it. I think the whole Song of Solomon is like that. In the first chapter, the bride says, I'm dark. Don't look at me, I'm dark. And yet the Lord says she's lovely. Or even last week we were talking about the Lord speaking these truths over the bride, even when they're not fully realized yet. That's a beautiful part of the discernment, that the Lord sees those things, but sometimes we don't, right? But to ask the Lord, what do you see in this person? What's the good things that you see in them? That's the beautiful, better part of discernment. And to call forth those truths and say, one day we're going to see this in your life, because I know the Lord is going to grow that in you, right? That's that good fruit that's going to grow in that garden. And the same thing for me. It's easy to see the brokenness. It's easy to see the speck in each other's eyes. Can we see what the Lord sees and call forth that goodness? Just like the companions, to encourage one another in the growing of our gardens, to steward each other as a marriage, with each other. That's discernment. This chapter ends at this. The bride says this, I am a wall and my breasts like towers. And I became in his eyes as one who found peace. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal-Hamon. He leased the vineyards to keepers. Everyone was to bring for its fruit 1,000 silver coins. My own vineyard is before me. You, O Solomon, may have 1,000, and those who tend its fruit 200. You who dwell in the gardens, the companions, listen for your voice. Let me hear it. All right. Again, that the king would have 1,000, but that we also get to encourage each other with the fruits of our garden as well, exhorting each other unto that day when we present each other pure and spotless before the Lord. The chief end of, that's the beauty of the garden. That's the story of the garden. God's desire to enjoy his people, right, and to be enjoyed by his people. That was the desire of God in Genesis chapter 2. It's the desire of God in Revelation 22, a garden to be enjoyed with each other together. Right? The Westminster Catechism says this. It's a question and answer, but what is the chief end of man? And the answer is the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Right? To enjoy him in the garden and to be a garden that he enjoys. It's about dwelling together and enjoying him and letting our fruit be the fruit that he enjoys. Not cultivating weeds, not having locked rooms, not having doors that are closed, but a fully productive garden for the Lord to harvest and enjoy for him and also to enjoy him. All right? So again, that's the beauty of the garden. We have the opportunity to do it together, to cultivate that in the place of prayer together. And, it's so honored to walk with people, walk with all of you guys in the prayer room. And if you haven't committed to a prayer meeting or haven't decided to come in the week, please do. Please come and let's cultivate our gardens together. Let's enjoy the Lord, and let's also create fruit in our lives, an open garden for him that he'll enjoy. He'll enjoy forever because he's a gardener and he loves the garden. Let's spend some time in prayer. I'm going to invite Becca back up. And let's just spend a little bit of time in prayer, and then we'll have a response to do that.